Welcome back. This is part 4 of the multi-plane panning background tutorial. Alright, so let's start filling in this center gap. And we have some of those elements already on stage. So let's work with the bones. Now since everything's spread out, we can have an area to place them. And let's place them right there. So let's hide those foreground rocks and the lizard. So we could focus on this skull and bones. Now we're definitely going to pan this just like we panned everything else. But before we do that, let's go into this group and we're going to do a quick animation within this group. Everything's locked. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to create a fly that buzzes around this dead carcass. It's going to be super simple. Just create an oval. Make it real small. And there's our fly. It's a perfect size. Doesn't have to be crazy detailed. We're going to animate this along a path. So instead of dragging it manually across the screen and making keyframes for each stop, we're going to make a path. So first let's name that layer fly. And create a new layer. And we can select the pencil tool. Make it a color that you can see the path you're going to make. So typically flies buzz around and go all sorts of places. And then there's our path. So what you have to do to get this fly to fly on that path is select that pencil mark that we just created. You have to Command C or Control C, copy it to the clipboard. You then have to select the fly, right click, and snap to path. And now we have an animation of the fly buzzing around the carcass. And we can delete that pencil. We don't need that anymore. We'll create another fly using the oval tool. We'll name that layer fly 2. Create another path. Select that pencil tool and just create a path for the fly to fly around. Now we have to select that pencil. Command C or Control C. Select the fly. Right click. Snap to path. And there they go. Now we can delete that layer. And you can see both of our flies are indeed flying. Now we just have to pan this animation like the other background elements. So let's turn on our foreground rock and lizard. Scrub to the beginning of the animation. We can lock everything. Go to our bone layer. Scroll to 10. and drag the bones straight across the canvas. Now if we scrub through, it's probably going to be a little slow. But he's a little further back than the lizard on the rock. So we'll grab that keyframe and drag it to right there. That looks about right. Looks pretty good. Let's preview that. Looks great. Okay, so now let's start to detail the ground level. We're going to break this ground level up into two quadrants: behind the bones and in front of the bones. So we'll start to work on behind the bones right now. So we'll create a new layer. We'll unhide that dirt patch. We're going to make it smaller. And we're going to start to detail our ground level. So we can pull out another dirt patch. But since these are duplicates, you want to change the size and have them far enough apart where you can't automatically tell that they're the same graphic. We'll move that layer back down. We'll start to create some more dirt patches. We created that new layer. And again, using the pen tool, you just want to create heaps of grass or mounds of dirt, just something to break up that flatness of the ground level. So we're going to fill that in with a dirt color. Let's remove the stroke. We can add bits of grass to it. I'll change that. Remove the stroke. Let's change it to a greenish color. We'll zoom in just a little bit so we can get in there and start to detail it. And again, got to convert the Bezier tool. You should be awful familiar with this tool by now. We've been using it a lot. I expect you to be a master by the end of this tutorial. And again, you just want to do sprouts of grass or any other things you'd find. You don't have to make heaps of dirt. You can make just patches of grass or some weeds. So we'll make a few of these to fill this stuff out. We'll actually add them to the library so we can reuse them as well. Oops. So that's good. We'll stick that behind that curve layer. We'll use the pencil tool just to create some dots. Anything to break up, make things look like dirt. Change that fill color. That looks good. Let's actually make that grass a little bit darker. There we go. Let's select that whole object because we're going to shrink it just a little bit. So we just made that a group, and we're going to add this group to the library. We're going to rename it Dirt Patch 2. And we can bring that let's actually flip this horizontally. Anything to make it look a little bit different than the original one we created. So let's make a grass patch. We'll create a new layer. Before that, we'll have to rename that. Now, after we're done creating all of these little dirt patches and grass patches in this area, we're going to, just like we did with those mountain layers, we're going to create them. We're going to put them all nested in the same layer so we can animate them all together. So we'll select the pen tool. Let's just make a grass patch. We'll zoom in, adjust it with the Convert Bezier tool. And we will clean this up a little bit. Gonna make it a little grass patch. Let's add a couple more nodes to it. Get it really spiky, a little more detail. There we go. Let's put a rock by that one. Just create the basic shape for the rock. Now you could use the oval tool to make these stones or rocks, but I like to make them a little bit more abnormal. Makes them look more organic. There we go. Let's change that color. Now I wouldn't go so far as to put a gradient on this. It's so small. I mean, if it was bigger, it definitely would. It's so small, it doesn't need it. So we're going to put a top on this rock. Let's create a top. I'm going to change the color to a brighter color. Let's edit it just a little bit. Bring that Bezier in. There we go. Let's see what that looks like. Good. Let's just move its placement. Put our cactus on the stage. There that is. It's going to be part of that same behind the bone layer. Let's adjust the size of this because it's obviously going to be just a tad bit bigger. There we go, that's pretty good. So that looks good. Let's create just a few more stones and pebbles and whatnots just to put behind here. Let's group that together and put it in our library. And then we can pull that out and put it other places. Flip that one. Transform. Flip horizontally. Let's make another cactus. So basically we're just filling in this area so it does not look as boring. So we'll place another cactus in here. Let's create a new layer. Let's drag these layers. Underneath, it's a dirt patch. We'll name it Cactus 3. And lock everything else. Off the canvas in this gray area, just because it's easier to see. Now, it doesn't matter what size you make this because we can adjust the size after we're done designing. Let's go in, adjust the nodes. Let's make an arm on him. And there we go. We have a cactus. So let's change the color to that brown. It's going to be a little bit too big. So we can scale him down by holding the shift to scale uniformly. That's great. I don't like what that looks like. I don't like that the flat area looks like. So we're going to add some more detail to this bottom. Maybe add a rock, some grass. So first we're going to do, we're going to group him and then work inside that group. So we can come down to the layer, or you can click on the actual thing, but I like going down to the layer and just grouping it together. We'll go into that group. So now he's isolated, and now we can add those much needed details. So let's zoom in to the base, and using our pen tool, we're going to create some dirt. We're going to adjust those. We need to add one more. Pretty good. We'll change the color of that to the darker. Add it to the base. So it looks much less boring. Create a new layer. Let's create a stone. Change that color. Create a top for the stone. Top. There we go. Them, put that at the base. Let's shrink it just a bit. And let's create a tuft of grass. Layer. Let's adjust it. And there we go. So let's change that color to that green. Put that behind the dirt. And there we go. Much better than just leaving that flat surface. Let's pull some more clumps out of the library just to add some fill space. Dirt patch. Let's shrink that a little bit. Let's grab that little spiky cactus that we created earlier. Upsize it a little bit. That's great. Add it again. Let's upsize this one cactus. Let's grab a dirt patch and throw that in front of that cactus. Zoom in. So you can always reuse the artwork that you keep in the library. Just repurpose it. You can squeeze that. That looks great. So this is really filling out now. So let's take all those layers and put them together. We're going to make a new layer, call it ground elements 1. We're going to place all these elements behind that skull on that layer. So we'll just grab them all by holding in shift, drag it into the ground elements, and there they all reside. So now what's left to do is to animate these elements, and since they're all part of that same layer, we can. So let's drag that layer over to the left, just like we did with those mountains, and I could already see that there's an issue right here. So before we get to start animating, let's add some more ground elements, and we can do that by just adding in some of the stuff that we have in our library. Change the color of that. We'll flip it. Totally new cactus. We can actually go in and manipulate those nodes so it can be a new cactus. Much skinnier. There we go. And let's drag that dirt patch in front of it and shrink it. Looks great. Let's add some more grass and dirt in that area. We can flip that. And that looks pretty good. Let's move those layers down into the ground elements layer. And now they're all part of that layer. Now we can animate it. So we pulled that over to the left already. So now let's drag it all the way to the right. And it looks pretty good. Let's see what it looks like with the foreground rock. Everything looks like it works pretty good. And this brings us to the end of part 4. In part 5, we'll finish filling out our foreground, continue animating, tweak some things, and publish our movie. I'll see you there.